The sound hit the hallway first, boots slamming against concrete, keys rattling and officers shouting commands like the prison had just caught fire. Inmates inside the Eastern Correctional Institution in Maryland jumped to their feet, confused, scared, and curious all at once. A full-scale raid was happening, the kind the prison tried to avoid unless things were completely out of control. And this time, things were far worse than anyone inside those walls ever understood. One inmate said he heard an officer yell, "Nobody moves, nobody talks," as a long line of guards marched into one of the housing units. But here's the twist. The raid wasn't targeting the inmates, it was targeting the guards. Phones buzzed with panic, keys were taken, radios were shut off. Officers were separated in order to stand against the wall like criminals. Some of them had worked there for years, trusted, respected, and seen as the people keeping the prison safe. But today, they were suspects. Federal agents and state investigators spread out through the building, going locker by locker, office by office. They were searching for proof that guards were smuggling drugs, tobacco, cell phones, and even knives into the prison. And they weren't just doing it for money. Some guards were trading contraband for sexual favors from inmates, meeting them in secret corners of the prison, and then threatening anyone who tried to speak up. One officer tried to walk away from the group, maybe to call someone or warn someone, but two agents grabbed him by the arm. "Not today. You're done." What the inmates saw that morning didn't look real. They watched from behind bars as guards, people who once punished them for breaking rules, were now being questioned, handcuffed, and escorted out. Some guards looked angry, some looked ashamed, and a few looked like they already knew this day was coming. But the truth was even more shocking. This raid wasn't the beginning of the corruption, it was the end. For months, investigators had been quietly building a case, listening to phone calls, tracking payments, and using hidden cameras. They had discovered that dozens of staff members at the Eastern Correctional Institution were part of a huge network of illegal trade inside the prison. The smuggling was so common that inmates said it felt like the prison had two systems, the one on paper and the one that truly ran everything. One inmate later told investigators that if you had money, you could get anything you wanted: drugs, phones, cigarettes, even food from outside. All you needed was the right guard. And if you crossed the wrong guard, they could make your life inside that prison a living nightmare. But the most dangerous part wasn't the smuggling, it was the warning system. If prison leaders planned a surprise search, certain guards tipped off the inmates ahead of time so they could hide their contraband. And if an inmate tried to report a corrupt officer, that inmate might be moved to a dangerous cell block or denied protection. The prison was supposed to be a controlled place. Instead, it was a hidden battlefield. As more guards were taken into custody during the raid, inmates watched with wide eyes. Some were stunned, some cheered, others stayed quiet because they knew that whenever something this big happened inside a prison, nothing would stay calm afterward. A loud crash echoed through the hallway when investigators broke open a locker belonging to a guard known for carrying two phones, one for official work and one for cash jobs, as inmates called them. Inside the locker, officers found bags of tobacco, stacks of prepaid cards, and a phone filled with messages from inmates asking for prices. The evidence was everywhere. This wasn't a small mistake. This was organized corruption. And yet, while the raid was happening, one inmate whispered to another, "If they took down this group, imagine who they still don't know about." Because corruption inside prisons rarely starts with just one officer. It spreads quietly, slowly, like smoke under a door. And even when you think the fire is out, something might still be burning in the walls. As federal agents prepared to escort the first group of arrested guards out of the prison, one officer shouted, "You don't know the whole story." His voice echoed through the hallway. The inmates heard it, the officers heard it, and investigators paused for a moment. Because he was right. There was more to the story, much more. And what came next would reveal secrets that no one in Maryland's prison system ever expected to come to light. The prison didn't return to normal after the raid, not even close. The air inside Eastern Correctional Institution felt heavier, tighter,
like everyone was waiting for something big to happen next. The guards who remained on duty walked differently, slower, quieter, watching their backs. And the inmates? They whispered in corners, trading guesses about who was next to fall. Right after the raid, investigators set up a temporary command room inside the prison. Big tables, thick folders, laptops, boxes filled with cell phones, cash, drugs, and handwritten notes. Every officer who still worked there had to pass that room to start their shift, and every time they did, their eyes drifted toward the door, some with fear, some with anger, and some with guilt.
The biggest rumor going around the prison was that investigators had flipped someone on the inside who had already confessed and was now helping them. No one knew if it was an inmate or an officer, but whoever it was, their word was strong enough to shake the whole institution. The fear was real, and that fear exploded one afternoon when a correctional officer named Daniels didn't show up for his shift. At first, supervisors thought he was just late, but when they called his phone, no answer. When they checked his house, he was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway, and his radio, the one he always kept in his bag, was missing too. The prison went silent when the news slipped through the cell blocks. "Inmate retaliation," one guard whispered. "No," another said. "He ran before they arrested him." But the truth was far more complicated. Investigators already had Daniel's name on one of their lists. He was involved in smuggling tobacco and phones. Not the worst crimes, but enough to put him behind bars. Enough to end his career. Enough to make him desperate. While officials searched for Daniels, inmates inside the prison were getting nervous. They knew that when officers panicked, inmates paid the price. More searches, more lockdowns, more tension. And they were right. That night, alarms blared through the prison as a full lockdown began. Every door slammed shut. Every inmate was ordered back into their cells. Guards moved quickly, checking every room, every stairwell, every corner. But deep inside one of the cell blocks, something unexpected happened. An inmate named Reggie, who had spent months trying to report corrupt guards, was pulled from his cell by two officers he had never seen before. They weren't rough with him, but their faces were serious. "We need to talk," one said. They brought him to a small interview room where three investigators were already waiting. Reggie sat down, confused but alert. He knew when something dangerous was coming. One investigator placed a stack of photos on the table. Phone screenshots, money transfers, and messages between officers and inmates. "We know you tried to report this months ago. We want you to finish your statement." Reggie looked at the photos and felt chills crawl up his arms. Everything he had tried to say before, everything guards had tried to cover up, was finally out in the open. But he knew something the investigators didn't. "This isn't everyone," he said quietly. "There are more, some bigger than these." The room went still. "Tell us," the investigator said. Reggie hesitated, not because he didn't want to talk, but because he knew talking could get him hurt, or worse. Inside prison, information is power, and dangerous power comes with deadly consequences.
Suddenly, loud banging echoed outside the door. Heavy footsteps, radios buzzing. Someone was shouting. The investigators stiffened. A guard pushed the door open. "You all need to move," he said quickly. "We found something." Reggie's eyes widened. "What happened?" The guard didn't answer. He just motioned for them to follow. They walked fast down the hallway toward a utility area near the back of the building. Guards stood in a tight circle around something on the ground. Some looked shocked. Some looked sick. Reggie stepped closer and froze. There, lying in the middle of the floor, was Officer Daniels, missing since the morning, but he wasn't alive. His shirt was torn, his face was bruised, and in his hand was a folded piece of paper. Investigators moved in immediately. One of them carefully opened the note, scanning it with shaking hands. Their eyes sharpened as they read the message. It wasn't a confession. It was a warning. A warning that said, "You're only looking at the small players. The real problem is still working inside this prison." The officers nearby looked at one another in fear. Someone inside the prison, someone with real power, didn't want the truth coming out. Someone willing to silence anyone who talked. Someone who understood that investigators were getting close. And now, with Daniels gone, that person was sending their loudest message yet. Reggie felt his stomach twist. He realized something frightening, something he wished he had never connected. If Daniels had been punished for talking, he might be next. The prison woke up the next morning with fear rolling through every hallway like fog. Nobody talked above a whisper. Not the guards, not the inmates, not even the investigators. Officer Daniels' death had shaken everyone. His note had made things even worse. It meant the corruption wasn't just a few greedy guards making side money. It meant someone powerful, someone still walking freely inside Eastern Correctional Institution, was pulling the strings. And now, investigators knew they weren't hunting a small group. They were hunting the person at the top. But they didn't have much time. That morning, investigators placed Reggie in a protected cell away from the general population. They didn't say it out loud, but everyone knew why. Daniels had been silenced for knowing too much, and Reggie had just proven he knew even more. But danger doesn't hide in prisons, it moves. Later that day, while investigators were reviewing security footage and paperwork, something strange happened. A guard who had been working at the prison for over 15 years walked up to the command room. His face was blank. He didn't sign in. He didn't knock. He simply said, "I need to talk." Investigators looked up, confused. They asked him to step inside. The guard sat down slowly, hands shaking. Sweat gathered on his forehead. He didn't look like a corrupt officer. He looked like a man carrying a secret too heavy for one person. And then he said the words investigators never expected. "You're only looking at the small players. The real problem is still working inside this prison." The room went silent. He continued, voice almost breaking. "The ones you arrested, most of them were just scared. They did what they were told because saying no meant trouble. But the person running things, they're still inside this prison." "Who?" an investigator asked. He swallowed hard. "If I say it here, I'm dead before the sun goes down." Before the investigators could speak, the prison alarm blasted through the walls, long, loud, and urgent. A lockdown order. Lights flashed red, radios crackled. The guard in the chair jumped to his feet in fear. "What's happening?" he asked.
A correctional captain ran past the door, shouting, "An inmate was attacked in Unit C, medical emergency." The investigators exchanged looks. Unit C was where they placed Reggie. They ran. The hallways flooded with guards trying to secure the area. Investigators pushed through them, sprinting to the far side of the cell block. When they reached the entrance, 2 officers were already pulling people back. "Move! Let us in!" an investigator yelled. Inside the unit, paramedics were kneeling beside a body on the floor, an inmate lying still, his uniform stained with blood. Investigators froze for a moment, fearing the worst. But as they stepped closer, one of the paramedics looked up. "He's breathing. Barely." It wasn't Reggie. It was another inmate, one known for passing secrets between guards and prisoners. The investigators' relief lasted only 1 second before reality hit. Someone had attacked this inmate because they thought he was the informant. Someone inside the prison was trying to kill the wrong people. Someone was desperate. As the injured man was carried out on a stretcher, an investigator turned sharply to a nearby officer. "Who ordered the movement in this unit today? Who approved inmate transfers?" The officer hesitated. "We got an email this morning from operations." "From who?" the investigator demanded. The officer whispered a name. A supervisor. The same position the guard had mentioned. The same person who had the power to change schedules, move inmates, and hide corruption. The investigators didn't waste another second. They marched straight toward the administrative wing, ready to confront the supervisor head-on. But when they reached the office, the door was open wide. The lights were off.
The desk drawers were open, and the computer was still running, but wiped clean. The chair was empty. The supervisor was gone. Panic spread through the building. Officers searched every room, every hallway, every exit. Investigators reviewed camera footage, but the supervisor had slipped through the cracks, walking out sometime between the inmate attack and the lockdown. They had vanished. Later that night, agents stood outside the prison under the dark Maryland sky, trying to understand how someone so involved in corruption had simply disappeared. One investigator looked at the empty road, shaking their head. He knew we were coming. Someone warned him. Back inside the prison, guards whispered that the corruption case would never truly be finished. Inmates said the same thing. Nobody trusted anyone. The scandal had exploded, arrests had been made, and the truth had come out. But the mastermind behind the entire operation had escaped into the world. And somewhere out there, the person who controlled the prison from the shadows was still free, still silent, and still dangerous. The Eastern Correctional Institution would never fully heal from what happened. Too many secrets, too many lies, too many people who should have protected the system, but instead destroyed it from within. And as the years passed, investigators admitted one thing. They solved the case, but they never caught the real villain. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more real true crime stories from across the United States.